The Suzuki V-Strom 800 Dual Explorer. I know, it's old news now, but we had a few things that we wanted to see for ourselves and provide, of course, a first impression ride for you guys. First, let's talk about some important details that many reviewers tend to overlook. The new TFT dash is crisp and boots up very fast. That's important. The switchgear is essentially the same as many previous V-Stroms, except for that the ignition is now a single press switch and the clutch is cable actuated. In other words, no hydraulic reservoir for the clutch like on the V-Strom 1000s and the 1050s. As most of you know already, the suspension is fully adjustable front and back, with the compression being really easy to access with just a flathead screwdriver. Now here's something that's really important. The stock engine guard. It appears to protect all of the engine components and is actually mounted to the frame and not just the engine case. The only exposed item is the catalytic converter, but I suspect that before you damage this, the rear tire will probably make contact and provide a good breakover angle. Unlike the previous V-Stroms, the shifter no longer has a linkage system that will bend or snap if you low side on your left. And good riddance, because the old linkage system almost got me stranded once. It also looks like the shift and rear brake levers are steel and not cast aluminum like they used to be, unless I'm mistaken. Oh, and look, the rear brake reservoir is already hidden and protected. Speaking of protection, the 800DE comes standard with a radiator guard. Now, considering that I've somehow survived this long without a radiator guard on my V-Strom 1000, I think this light-duty one will suffice. The seat is as easy as ever to remove, and the battery is immediately accessible. And wow, Suzuki has definitely been listening because, by the way, you no longer have to remove the entire gas tank to get to your air filter. This is, however, a good time to mention that if you are doing a water crossing, then do keep in mind that if your butt is getting underwater, you're probably also drowning your engine. So just like an Oregon Trail, be careful in those river crossings. Now, if you're also planning on going through sticky mud, I'm not really sure if the front fender clearance is enough to keep your front wheel from locking up, especially with knobbies. I do know that it is significantly roomier than what's on the previous V-Stroms. Alright, let's go ride. Traction control setting is at 1, which means that it has some slip, but it's not off all the way. Looks like ABS is on 2, which not really concerned about that because this is all pavement only, by the way. This first impression video is not going off-road. The muffler is so quiet on the bike that I'm not used to the amount of throttle input I need to put to get going. This first impression is it's back-to-back with the V-Strom 1000 owner, okay? 2018. So hopefully that means something. Of course, the 800s all come with quick shifters now. Parallel twin. So of course I'm going to use it. Very smooth. A bit of a, throttle jerk to it, but that's expected because the computer shuts off the throttle for a split second. There's definitely a lot of wind on the bike compared to my Juvi Airflow windscreen. That's because these V-Stroms have a very small, not readily adjustable windshield now. So because of that, the biggest thing I'm going to be looking for is not wind protection, but wind buffeting. And that's when you get turbulence that's, shakes your head around. That was a big problem on the generation of V-Stroms that I had. The OEM windshields were very, very bad at that. So a lot of people, some people are okay with them, but most people had to buy aftermarket Juvi or Puigs. Yeah, you definitely need a little bit more throttle input to get going off the line than the 1000, and that just is something you got to get used to. It's definitely not a negative. Very well balanced motorcycle. I can't speak for weight. I know that on spec, on paper, it's a little bit heavier than its competitors, but it doesn't feel like a heavy bike. Moving it on the parking lot, riding it slow, it all feels lighter than the 1000, and that to me is the biggest indicator that this is
even though you're downgrading in displacement size, it's a worthy upgrade for those V-Strom owners who want to have more off-road capability. Yeah, the quick shifter is very smooth. Once you get into third and fourth gear, you don't really feel the quick shifter at all. It's a smooth transition like butter. I think it's that second and third gear where it's a little bit clunkier, and that is something that might become alleviated throughout mileage going up on this bike. Standing up on the bike, I feel like I could probably move the handlebars, rotate them forward a little bit. That'll bring them higher to my shoulders and further away from my waist, which is good, which is what I would want. I don't think there's a need to install risers on these bars like there was on the previous gens, where they were more road oriented, which meant that when you went off-road and you wanted to stand, you needed to have risers or something to be able to have better ergonomics while riding. Let's give it some beans here. Those of you who have seen other reviews from the earlier first impressions, you probably heard of people talking about foot peg vibrations from the engine. Yes, I can confirm, you know, those RPMs that I was riding, there is vibration in the foot pegs. Kind of tickles your feet, even with heavy ADV boots. So I'm at 5,000 RPM, 70 mile indicated, and the vibrations are a little better. If I go up to 5,500 or 6,000, I feel that the vibrations increase. The handlebars are smooth. I don't see any issues with vibrations in the handlebars. It's just the foot pegs, and it's primarily the right foot peg. Riding this bike is almost like riding a naked bike without a windscreen. There's really not a whole lot of wind protection, which is okay. It's 90 degrees, so I'm totally fine with it. Soft suspension out of the factory. A lot of people will probably want to stiffen it up a little bit, whether it's preload or complete overhaul, but I'm 180, 185 pounds with all my gear on, so the stock suspension should work for me as long as I tweak the preload to the point where, you know, I don't have any issues bottoming out off-road. So in fifth gear, 45 miles an hour, 3,500 RPM, the V-Strom 1000 V-twin engine has a lot of torque in this area. I'm not sure what I think about this parallel twin as far as low-end torque. I feel like I'm utilizing more of my mid to high range RPM when I want to move. But again, that's all very, very, very first and fresh impression. Bike feels very easy to lean over. I haven't even thought a second about the fact that there's a 21-inch front wheel on this bike. Not even a second. I mean, I know that a lot of people are going to mention that, but coming off of a 17-19 combination, the 17-21 is really, it's fine. This is a really pretty area. This, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the differences between the V-twins and the parallel twins is sometimes, at least with the Suzukis, the V-twins were very smooth at low RPM. I mean, all the way down to 1,500, you know? I mean, there's a bit of a clunkiness going on in there. But besides that, if you give it a throttle, it didn't feel like it was shaking and, you know, wanting to hiccup a lot. The parallel twin, once you get below 2,000 RPM, it really feels like it's something's wrong. You know, it doesn't feel as smooth as a V-twin. I'm nitpicking, but I'm also just trying to provide feedback at first thought, you know, without processing it too much in my mind. Again, the muffler is really quiet on this bike, so I don't know if you guys heard anything at all, but, you know, the V-Stroms aren't necessarily bikes that you would show off to your friends with your exhaust note. That's where Leo Vinci and Akrapovich and all them come in handy. The seat is comfortable. The shape of the seat is very similar to the V-Strom 1000 of my generation. However, it feels different. It feels like your tailbone is cupped in a little bit more in the seat. Therefore, it feels a little more supportive. You still feel like you're sitting in the bike, unlike the Africa Twin or some like a dirt bike feeling where you feel like you're sitting on top of the bike. You feel like you're sitting and you're saddled inside of a bike. It's a very comforting and maybe even confidence inspiring on the road. Now when you're off-road, that may be a different scenario. Man, that quick shifter, it's like heated seats in a car, or maybe I should even say cooled, ventilated seats in a car. You don't ever think you want them or need them until you try them, and then you can't go back. Wouldn't be surprised if I get on my V-Strom and then try to do clutchless changes and find out real quick I don't have a quick shifter installed. By the way, I don't know if you guys noticed, but when I pulled out on that highway, the front end came up a little bit. I don't know if it's just spring different and it just, you know, has more sag in the back and the front end can come up, but this thing has some power. That was no clutch, that was just accelerating and the front end came up a little and I could feel the lightness of the handlebars. Could be gearing, could be, there's a lot of variables that, you know, make a bike happier to wheelie. Now if I try to wheelie it, you know, bump the throttle and stuff like that, I think it would be very easy and comfortable to do a wheelie on this bike, for those of you that are asking. So not a lot of wind buffeting on the helmet. Definitely a lot of wind noise because again, you're getting a lot of air. And I think if you take this bike on a touring trip where you're spending a lot of time on the interstate, that's probably the only time where you might consider the use of an aftermarket windscreen with more wind protection. But I do like the airflow. It's a hot day, it's warm. Well, it says it's 82. It's humid though, and that airflow feels nice. And because it's not buffeting me and throwing my helmet around left and right, it's not really bothering me that much. Yeah, first to second gear and the quick shifter is the only one that's clunky, I would say. Everything else is pretty smooth. And that's to be expected. I don't think anybody else has that figured out yet. Brakes are good. I always use my middle finger on the front brake. That's just been a habit of mine. I don't need more than one finger. And no issues there at all. I don't feel like I have to press any harder. The V-Strom 1000s were known to have very good front brakes. And the 1050 as well. And the 800 feels just fine. No complaints there. Again, standing up feels great. I have risers on my actually no, I have a Pro Taper handlebar on my V-Strom that equates to the stock handlebars with a 1.5-inch riser. And so, even on my V-Strom, when I stand, I have to hunch over more than I am right now. So that's a good thing. That's very good for me because that's one thing that bothers me is on the 1000 when I go off-road on trails, I just get tired because ergonomically I'm not standing right. I have to bend my knees more and kind of crouch down and hunch over to be able to have perfect access and control to my levers. So that's kind of encouraging that the 800 that they tried to give it more of that adventure off-road ergonomics as opposed to like the 650 and the 1050 non-DE versions. The bike revs very fast. That's something I noticed too. You can see the traction control light blinking. And that's traction control setting 1. So, plenty of power. I don't know if you need that much more with this, style of bike. Of course, we're not loaded down with camping equipment and, panniers and whatnot, so, or even a passenger. It's a very clean cockpit. I can easily see myself adding what I need to add without running out of too much space. Of course, you got the bar on top. That'll allow you to mount your GPS unit, whether it's a Garmin or whatever, I think it should have plenty of clearance. The only thing that I would wonder is if you may not have a lot of clearance if you have like a taller unit that wants to stick up and over the windscreen. So you may have to raise that windscreen up, which it looks like we have one more available position to get it up by about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch or so. In other words, if you wanted to mount your Garmin vertically, half of your Garmin or part of your Garmin would be exposed to the elements, whether that's rain or bugs, wind obviously. I actually wanted to mount the GoPro on that bar, but I couldn't because I didn't have my adapter for a smaller diameter bar. But I could totally see doing that, mounting a GoPro there, having one on your helmet. You know, that'd be a pretty good angle from there, because you have plenty of distance to get that wider shot. Because sometimes having that front view helps depict to the viewers, you know, your off-road situation, or, you know, how much input your body is having to apply to what you're riding through. Anyway, that's my first impression. Would I buy one of these? Absolutely. I am getting tired of wrestling my V-Strom 1000 off-road. It's a heavy, clunky bike. The suspension is very limited, and you have to work twice as hard to do, you know, what everybody else is doing on their Africa Twins and, you know, whatever else, their KTMs. And I'm not complaining, I'm just stating the obvious. You know, you guys have seen our videos, you've seen what we do, where we go. You know, I'm not really stopped by anything, but it's definitely a challenge to do the same thing everybody else is doing on their ADV bikes, just because the older V-Stroms were not designed that way. All right.